family and friends of Stacey Charles say a New Orleans woman who was killed in Baton Rouge last week are celebrating her life.
She was stabbed to death by her ex-boyfriend. The investigative unit's best casualty has been following this story closely. She reports tonight from Gretna, where that memorial took place, and has new information on the circumstances that led up to her murder.
Michael, Sylvia, it was an emotional evening as hundreds of balloons were released by the family and friends of Stacey Charles, who passed away last week.
Today, we honor her by lifting our hearts, just as these balloons lift into the sky.
This is one of the hardest things I've ever been through. I never imagined that I would lose one of my closest friends.
This is the story of Stacey Charles. On November 13, 2025 at 2:13 a.m. Baton Rouge police were dispatched to a location on Old Hammond Highway. A 23-year-old woman, identified as Stacey Charles, was found with multiple stab wounds and was transported to the hospital, where she died during surgery. This incident became the final point in a documented sequence involving prior reports, protective orders, and previous law enforcement contact. Weeks earlier, Charles filed for protection against Steven Heinrich, citing harassment, stalking, and physical assault. The first request was not served and was dismissed due to non-appearance. On November 5th, Heinrich was arrested for battery of a dating partner, and a new protective order was issued and served. He was released on a $2,500 bond. Court records show he had multiple out-of-state protective orders, but not all were presented during the bond hearing. In the early morning of November 13th, Heinrich arrived at Charles's residence. Evidence indicates he used his vehicle to strike her car, removed her from the vehicle, and stabbed her multiple times. After departing the scene, he drove into oncoming traffic, collided head-on with another vehicle, and set himself on fire inside his own car. First responders extinguished the fire, and he was transported to the hospital, where he died the following day.
Baton Rouge police report a murder suspect set himself on fire shortly after committing the crime. This happened overnight near Old Hammond Highway and Sherwood Forest at about 2:15 in the morning. Officers say Steven Heinrich Jr. ripped a woman out of her car while she was parked at her house, stabbed her repeatedly. He then got into the car, took off, crashed shortly after, then lit himself on fire. Police put it out and put Heinrich in the hospital, where he is right now being treated with life-threatening injuries.
Before we dive into today's story, we want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? And how do you feel as the story unfolds? Welcome to Deadly Crime Unmasked, the show where we expose the shocking crimes that rip through communities and the chilling secrets lurking behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. You won't want to miss the gripping story that's coming up. Now let's dive in.
Michael, Sylvia, we're here in Gretna, which is near Charles's hometown of Harvey. There were dozens of people. They're still lingering here behind me that came to celebrate her life, releasing purple balloons in her honor.
Oh. Everything that he did to my daughter, he was doing to the same girl. A year and a half, you harassed and stalked my daughter. A year and a half, you have tortured us. The system failed both of these young ladies.
Stacey Charles was a 23-year-old woman living in or near the Old Hammond Highway area of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This location would later become the center of a homicide investigation involving her and her boyfriend. Steven Heinrich Jr. Charles lived within close proximity to where the attack occurred, which made her residence a frequent point of contact between her and Heinrich as their relationship deteriorated in the months leading up to her death. Charles was in a dating relationship, or at least an intimate association, with Heinrich. Their relationship had a pattern of tension and recurring conflict. According to police documentation, Charles contacted authorities earlier in November regarding a battery incident involving Heinrich. This marked the first official indication that the situation had escalated beyond personal disputes and into documented physical violence. The complaint suggested an ongoing cycle of conflict that had already reached the level of police involvement. Prior to the November battery report, Charles had taken several steps on her own in an effort to create distance and legal protection from Heinrich. On October 6, 2025, she filed a restraining order in family court. The filing outlined specific concerns regarding her safety. In her written request, Charles described stalking and harassment that had been increasing over time. She stated that Heinrich had engaged in physical abuse, including punching and making threats. Her report also included digital harassment. She alleged that Heinrich used fake phone numbers to contact her and her family, sent inappropriate images, and attempted to control or intimidate her through repeated unwanted communication. The protective actions she took indicated a pattern of escalating behavior from Heinrich. The restraining order request represented a formal attempt to intervene before the situation worsened. Despite the documentation she provided, the request did not progress effectively. Officers attempted to serve the order, but they were unable to locate Heinrich. Without successful service, the temporary protection could not advance through the standard legal process. Ultimately, the request was dismissed when Charles did not appear in court for follow-up proceedings. The dismissal left her without any formal legal protection at that point, and the underlying issues in their relationship remained unresolved. The situation changed on November 5th, when Heinrich was arrested for battery of a dating partner. During this police response, Charles informed officers that he had been beating on her all day. Police documented visible physical injuries, including cuts and bruises, which corroborated her statement and provided physical evidence of abuse. This incident resulted in Heinrich being taken into custody, creating a temporary separation between the two. Within the same week, after Heinrich's arrest, Charles was granted a protective order. This was the first successful protective measure after her earlier attempt failed. Heinrich was formally served with the order within 24 hours of his arrest, making it enforceable. This marked the beginning of an official legal boundary meant to prevent further contact. However, its effectiveness would depend on enforcement and Heinrich's compliance, which became a concern in the days that followed. Stephen Heinrich Jr., approximately 28 years old, had a documented history of conflict, violence, and restraining orders prior to his relationship with Charles. His background played a significant role in forming a complete picture of the risks associated with the escalating situation. Heinrich had 6 out-of-state protective orders issued by various women. These orders indicated a pattern of behavior extending beyond a single relationship or isolated incident. They showed that multiple individuals in different jurisdictions had filed legal complaints against him for harassment, stalking, threats, or violence. The presence of numerous restraining orders across state lines suggested that his behavior had been consistent over time and location. His criminal history included at least 2 prior arrests in other states. Court records showed charges involving criminal mischief and violating a protective order. These incidents demonstrated a willingness to disregard legal boundaries and court mandates, including previous restraining orders issued to protect individuals from him. The violation of a protective order in particular provided context for understanding the risks associated with granting him bond or allowing him to remain in the community after new allegations. Charles's own allegations aligned with this history. Her reports included stalking and harassment across social media and direct communication. She described threats, punching, and shoving. Police documentation from the November 5th arrest supported her statements. Officers observed injuries consistent with her claim that Heinrich had assaulted her throughout the day. Her injuries provided tangible evidence of the ongoing violence. The bond process following Heinrich's November 5th arrest revealed additional systemic issues. After his arrest for battery of a dating partner, Heinrich posted a $2,500 bond. This allowed him to be released from custody pending further court proceedings. Although he had been served with a protective order within 24 hours of his arrest, the bond decision determined whether he would remain detained or return to the community while the case progressed. At the bond hearing, the court was informed of Heinrich's prior arrests. However, the information presented did not include the full extent of his history. Not all 6 out-of-state protective orders were provided to the judge. According to an assistant district attorney, several of these orders were omitted from the evidence packet shown in the hearing. This omission limited the court's understanding of Heinrich's overall risk profile. Without documentation of the full pattern of behavior, including repeated restraining orders and violations, the court did not have access to all relevant information that could have influenced bond decisions. The bond amount remained at $2,500. The protective order served to Heinrich created a legal boundary between him and Charles, but the order itself depended on enforcement and Heinrich's compliance. His prior behavior, including ignoring protective orders in other states, suggested potential risks that were not fully considered during the bond process. The case drew rapid media attention, led primarily by the WBRZ investigative unit, which began examining the sequence of events leading up to the homicide. Their coverage highlighted key concerns: previous protective order requests, a recent bond release, and multiple out-of-state protective orders connected to Heinrich that were not fully considered at the time of his November 5th arrest. Media reporting amplified public awareness and placed the handling of the case under scrutiny from both local residents and legal observers. In response to the growing attention, the district attorney's office opened an internal review into how the case was managed before the homicide. Early reports indicated concerns regarding missing documentation, particularly records related to Heinrich's past protective orders from other states. Questions were raised about whether these orders were properly communicated to prosecutors and whether they should have influenced the bond decision. The DA's review also examined whether law enforcement acted adequately on Charles's earlier request for protection, which had been dismissed due to failure of service. Public pressure increased as more information surfaced. Families of other victims who previously reported stalking or harassment by Heinrich came forward. Notably, the mother of a former stalking victim publicly stated that Heinrich had demonstrated clear patterns of dangerous behavior long before his relationship with Charles. These accounts contributed to heightened criticism of the system's inability to contain individuals with repeated histories of violence, especially when multiple victims had previously filed complaints. The case also generated significant policy discussions. Legal analysts, advocacy groups, and domestic violence prevention organizations raised questions about how protective orders are enforced, how risk is assessed during bond hearings, and what level of documented danger should legally justify denying bail. Heinrich's low bond amount and quick release were frequently cited in these conversations, prompting examination of whether current Louisiana statutes adequately address high-risk offenders with multi-state histories. Broader policy debates extended to interstate communication of protective orders, highlighting gaps in how different jurisdictions share or validate domestic violence records. Experts suggested that improved data integration could prevent courts from evaluating offenders with incomplete information. The case became a reference point in ongoing conversations about modernizing domestic violence legislation, refining bail guidelines, and standardizing protective order enforcement across state lines. Community reaction was immediate and widespread. Victims' advocates criticized the system failures, arguing that existing policies did not effectively protect individuals attempting to leave dangerous relationships. Families of Charles and prior victims expressed concern about the repeated patterns of escalation that were left unaddressed. Local media outlets echoed these concerns in editorial coverage, further intensifying calls for reform. By the end of the investigation's initial phase, the Charles Heinrich case had evolved beyond a single homicide. It became a focal point for discussions about systemic weaknesses, procedural gaps, and the urgent need for reforms designed to prevent similar incidents in the future. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.